My name is John Beaman. I'm a member of the Rockwall Young Republicans, and I currently sit on the city council in the city of Heath. Small little city, about a little under 10,000 people, right around 12 square miles. First elected in May of 2018 and been serving since. So the issues that we see in Heath, being a small, primarily residential town, are different than what you're going to see in Dallas, obviously, even Plano or even Rockwall. So the big thing that the city of Heath City Council will deal with every year is going to be the budget. That's going to be the number one thing because that's the biggest where the rubber meets the road impact. There are a number of other different things. Number two is going to be development. And that's definitely been a source of, we'll call it entertaining meetings, both at the planning and zoning level and at city council in the past. But that's a very important one because it impacts the budget. It impacts the identity of your community. So for the city of Heath, number one is going to be the budget year in and year out. Close number two is going to be development. How do you kind of plan to grow while allowing the free market, kind of giving that free market system, so to speak, the ability to take off and really work its magic, but also having a little bit of coordination in there because you can't overflood one area with only one type of development because otherwise it runs rampant. Ultimately, the free market system works and you have to enable it to work. And so it's a combination of coordinating that growth with free market principles. So those are going to be the top two things for the city of Heath: the budget year in and year out, and then planning for growth. Growing up, I always had an interest in serving and giving back. Both my grandfathers served in the armed forces, and I knew that I wanted to give back in some way. I wasn't sure if it was military, wasn't sure if it was public service, or maybe just grassroots, but I knew that I wanted to give back. So, kind of rewinding, this kind of goes back to 2012. Um, Based off political history, that was kind of one that should have gone the other way. I mean, it was our turn, for lack of a better term. And when it didn't go our way and on such a massive level, it was kind of a trigger moment for me saying, hey, I got to get involved in some shape, way, or form. I don't care if it's just knocking on doors. I want to contribute. I want to get involved. So I started asking around. It kind of one thing led to another. I started getting involved with the local GOP here. Ultimately became a get out the vote chair. Started attending city council meetings. And at that point, then a board opening came up. Then the city council appointed me to the board of adjustment, which, if you're not familiar with it, do a little bit of research on it because it's not what you expect, and it's a very powerful board. So definitely want to know the details surrounding that board. Then fast forward about a year and a half, we had an opening on city council. And that's actually when I decided to run. I was actually ironically approached by a few different people and was asked to run. So I prayed about it, talked to some close family, close friends, and ultimately decided to pull the trigger on it. It has to be that way. I mean, if you really want to make a difference at the local level, there's a little bit of a misnomer that you put your name on the ballot and you get elected. It doesn't work that way. It's kind of like a college football championship. We all wonder, why the heck is Alabama so dominant? What's the dynasty? What's the secret? It's not just that they play good football on Saturday. It's not just that they win the big game, at the national championship. It's one during spring and summer practice. Same thing in politics. If you want to make a difference at that city level, you really need to be getting involved in advance because not only will you know the issues on a deeper level, but you'll also know the players and the people that it impacts most. And that connection, that knowledge is priceless. I think the other one that we all battle as young conservatives, as young Republicans, is the age factor. The average age in Heath is about 45, and I was 24 at the time. So getting in there and saying, "Hey, I'm going to come here and serve on your city council," there were a few moments where you're like, "Whoa!" I think for me, even though I was young, it was important to note the difference between being young and being inexperienced. Even though I was young, I actually had good experience. I had worked for our family business. It was a private equity firm for about 6 years, different areas in oil research, startups, investment research. I had been serving in the political community for a while. So even though while I was young, it wasn't that I was totally inexperienced. And that was something to kind of, talk about the sales process, so to speak, and overcoming those objections. That's how I overcame, the young age question that is inevitably asked. It's like, hey, you're awfully young for this position. Yes, but there's a difference between being young and being inexperienced. I am young, but I'm not inexperienced. I might not be as experienced as someone that's 45, but to say that I'm inexperienced and have none of it would be a gross understatement, or rather a gross misrepresentation. I think some of the best parts include knowing that you're really making a lasting impact. I mean, the decisions that you make at city council are very much impactful. It's where the rubber meets the road. So at city council in Texas, you're voting on the property tax rate. In Heath, it comes to 1/3 of the tax rate, because we have our county tax, we have our ISD tax, and we have our city tax. That is a huge where the rubber meets the road moment. So knowing that I am playing a proactive role in implementing, free market principles, conservative values, so on and so forth, that's a very, very rewarding moment. And knowing that people support the decisions that we make is very encouraging too. I think some of the difficult parts of being on city council is when you have to make the tough call. Thankfully, haven't had to deal with this, but there are theoretical situations where you might have to adjust the tax rate where you don't like it. It's very much practical where the rubber meets the road. You might have to make a vote that you don't like. You have your gut instinct telling you, hey, this just doesn't seem right, but you look at the data, you go through it very, very closely, and you're like, legally, this is the right thing. Economically, this is the right thing. Emotionally, this royally sucks, but this is what has to be done. I'll give you a prime example. So on the Board of Adjustment, my first board meeting, we had 4 people on the board of 10, which is the minimum for a quorum. And the applicant was requesting a variance to our masonry requirement. Basically, it was 80% of the building for that zoning had to be masonry. And he presented it. I think it was way below. I won't throw out a number. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was significantly lower. And it was basically, yeah, we don't want to pay the cost of the masonry building, but in our charter, in our official documents on record, it explicitly states, yeah, you're not allowed to make an exception based off of finances. And so I ended up voting against it. It was 3-1, but it required 4 votes to pass. I didn't like making that vote at all. It was a very difficult vote to make, but it was one of those moments where, looking at the facts, looking at the data, it was logically the correct vote, but it was not a fun vote at all. The time commitment will vary significantly. Obviously, as you hear, it will take what you give, and that's very true. You can literally make it a full-time position in terms of hours if you want. For the city of Heath, we're a smaller city, so it's 100% volunteer. The requirement, is basically 2 monthly meetings. However, there is more that goes on behind the scenes. On average, anywhere between 5 to 10 hours a week for a small town like Heath. Obviously, there are seasons where that changes significantly. Sometimes things are going really, really well. There's not a whole lot to do. It might be a couple hours a week or even less. Then there's situations like COVID where you're on as many phone calls as you can get your hands on. You're doing everything extra. You're spending time after work hours working on stuff. You're moving your work schedule around to where you're putting in, it's almost like another full-time position. So there will definitely be some variability, but for a size, the city of Heath, on average, you're probably looking at 5 to 10 hours a week. Well, in the city of Heath, thankfully, we are blessed with a very good problem. We have an abundance of conservative people who can run. In general, though, speaking from a broader perspective, that's where it all starts. That's where people get into the system. That's where they learn not only a lot about government, but they learn politics. There's a difference between government and politics. And the best way I think you can kind of distinguish those is administration versus the political elected side. That's where political careers start, statistically speaking, in general. And if you look at a lot of the office holders in DC and even at the state level here in Texas, many of them have experience at the city level. That's kind of where you build your base. You get involved, you start working up. And then next thing you know, you have someone running for office who's been city council for 8 years. They served for 8 years on a board before that. They know everyone surrounding the community. And that's what makes them such a difficult candidate to unseat when they're already, in that state level. They've been holding that position for 4 or 6 years. That's part of why it's so hard to defeat an incumbent. Surround yourself with good mentors first and foremost. I mean, as the old saying goes, you kind of become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. It's true. And it's especially true in the world of politics. Surround yourself with good people with a shared, fundamental value system. The example that I would give is, if you're, strong Christian conservative, surround yourself with strong Christian conservative mentors, people that you can really open up with. You can get through the technical stuff. You figure that out pretty quickly. But having that support group to help keep you on track, to help keep your head straight, to help keep your head clean, not get any of that head trash stuff. It's vital. So definitely find a small group of people. It might only be one if you have that structure too, but have anywhere from 1 to 5 people that you can really lean on. That will be priceless for you.